All right, thanks, Mackenzie. All right, next up we have Dr. Gordon Shepard. To the mic.
Let me begin with a small disclaimer. I've only written one poem in my life. Fortunately, it's not the one that I'm going to read for you tonight. Instead, I'm going to read a poem written by an old friend of mine by the name of Eloy Gonzalez. So let me, first of all, tell you how Eloy came to write his poem. It was long, long ago in a land, no, that's a different story. Actually, it was quite a while ago. It was late August of 1970. And I was driving across the country for New York to begin graduate school. Just a few months earlier, in May 1970, 4 students had been shot to death, 9 others wounded by a unit of the Ohio National Guard as the students were protesting against the Vietnam War. So that was on my mind, especially as I drove through the state of Ohio and into Pennsylvania. When I got halfway through Pennsylvania, I had to get off the interstate to get some gas for the car. Stopped at this little country service station. And while I was pumping the gas, I looked down the road and I saw this little sign. And the sign said, Shiloh, 5 miles. Shiloh, that's a biblical name. It's also the name of one of the horrific battlefields of the American Civil War. Now, of course, that battle was not fought in Pennsylvania, it was in Tennessee. But there were other battles in Pennsylvania, of course, namely Gettysburg. So as I left the station, got back onto the interstate, I was thinking of Shiloh and also of the war in Vietnam. And to stay awake, I started composing some verses in my head. Some anti-war verses. And it's the first time I got a chance to stop, I wrote those down on the back of a map, my road map. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, and I was at my first teaching job while I was trying to finish my dissertation. And I lived next door to a member of the Spanish faculty, a young man by the name of Eloy Gonzalez. He taught classes in classical Spanish literature, but his real passion was poetry. And sometimes we would talk about poetry. He asked me if I'd ever written anything. And I said, well, once. And he said, really? What was it? What was the name of your poem? And I said, Shiloh. He asked me if he could see it. I wasn't sure about that. I didn't think it was very good. But he talked me into it, so I gave him a copy. And the next day, I asked him what he thought. And he paused, and then he smiled, and he said, well, he liked the sentiment of the poem. I took that as a compliment. He also said that he had been provoked to write his own poem. And he wanted to call it Shiloh. Did I care if he did that? That was fine. And then he asked me if I would translate his poem from Spanish into English. Eloy had perfectly good English, probably better than mine, but whenever he wrote his poetry, he always wrote in Spanish. I knew a little Spanish. I'd never translated anything, but I told him I'd give it a try. So I did that, and lo and behold, a couple of months later, he told me that he had submitted it to a literary journal called the Latin American Literary Review, and it had been published. That was my first publication, technically, because they published his poem and my translation. And that's the poem I'm going to read for you tonight. And I'm going to read it in both the Spanish version and in the English translation. Shiloh. En el ojo del águila, las carreteras de Shiloh son cicatrices de cemento. In the eye of the eagle, the highways of Shiloh are scars of cement. Bajo el asfalto, dicen que en Shiloh fluye la sangre, óxido de sangre, bajo los rieles. Beneath the asphalt, they say that in Shiloh, the blood flows, oxide of blood, beneath the rails. Un museo trastornado oculta su vergüenza bajo el verde inconsecuente. A deranged museum hides its shame beneath the indifferent green. La raíz de cada olmo es un tentáculo sordo que florece en carabines descarnadas, en trozos de charreteras azules y grises, y aquel fémur, una cruz, una bandera. The root of every elm is a sordid tentacle, rich in corroded carbines, in fragments of blue and gray epaulets, and that thigh bone, a cross, a flag. En esas noches indolentes, acribilladas de luciérnagas, en esas noches borrachas de frescura, en que quisiera olvidarse todo, brillan las almas de Shiloh. In the indolent nights, riddled with fireflies, in those nights, drunken with coolness, in which one would like to forget all, glitter the souls of Shiloh. Y se oye sin paz ni tregua, un susurro vergonzante, un zumbido que quisiera ser alarido de odio, torrente de huesos, inconcebible, incesante grito de almas apenas comprendidas. And one hears without peace or respite a shamed murmur, a buzzing that would like to become an outcry of rage, torrent of bones, inconceivable, incessant shriek of souls scarcely understood. Bajo la calma verde de Shiloh, beneath the calm, beneath the green calm of Shiloh. Muchas gracias.